Good morning, and welcome to the Thursday, October the 19th, 2023 Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have a fun-filled morning ahead of us, and even I hear the earth will move. So I would like to see if there is an appetite. Wait, we need a motion.
Yes, I'd like to pass a motion to invite Director Toth to participate in the EAS meeting with us.
And is there a seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Welcome, Director Toth. You can become visible now. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. Any changes, alterations to the agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? All right. I'd also welcome a motion to receive all reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor, and that goes. Then, the very first thing up is a delegation from Transportation Choices, Sunshine Coast.
All right, can you hear me? Not quite, so I got to bring this a little closer. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for taking the time for this, both to the directors and to staff for time in advance. My name is Alan. I'm here with Tanis, Scott, and Cedric to request support for a project for all ages and abilities infrastructure to connect our Sunshine Coast communities. If you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to ask. This initiative is a joint project of Connect the Coast and TRAC. Connect the Coast is a purpose-built society for this initiative. We're pleased to note that we've been granted charitable status. TRAC is a member-based volunteer organization with a mission to support healthy communities, reduce our carbon footprint by promoting sustainable transportation alternatives, including walking, cycling, and transit. So we advocate for change and host events that promote active transportation culture, like Go by Bike Week, the Slow Food Ride this summer. Our next event is a screening of The Engine Inside, November 15th, at the Heritage Playhouse. It'll be great. So getting a little bit sidetracked there, but we're here today to talk about all ages and abilities connections, which are important because they're safe, comfortable, and convenient for our children, the seniors, and our cyclists and pedestrians. So examples of what we're thinking are like the Tofino Multi-Use Path, the Spirit Trail in North Vancouver, and our very own Roberts Creek multi-use path. So this is pretty typical infrastructure for the Sunshine Coast, and it's not all that encouraging for cyclists or pedestrians. We have quite a bit of this, which is just downright dangerous. And we need more of this for our 55,000 residents, 400,000 annual visitors. Well-designed infrastructure keeps pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicle traffic safer. Physical activity improves our public health. Safe paths create inclusive transportation system for all our residents. Cycle tourists typically spend more than other types of tourists, and of course, biking and walking reduces our carbon emissions. So our timeline and processes are in 3 phases. The first phase was a preliminary design. We went through a seeking funding and a study. We're currently in the feasibility and planning phase, which is iterative over smaller segments of the entire route. And so the feasibility is broken down into seeking funding, getting provincial support, getting local support, and actually doing a study. Followed by construction, which would be negotiating agreements, seeking funding, and of course, construction. So to give you a little sense of where we're coming from, in the past, we were engaging with local governments and Modi at the SCRD's Transportation Advisory Committee. In that venue, we initiated the Coastal Bike Route, which is a provincial designation of our road as a bike route, and you can see the signs on the highway. Unfortunately, after the designation, the roads didn't improve too much. Later, Modi did an active transportation infrastructure gap assessment for the Sunshine Coast for our active transportation, and that's the map that you see on screen right here. The red represents gaps, the green represents partial gaps, and essentially the entire Sunshine Coast is an active transportation gap. Now we're in the midst of the Highway 101 alternative route with some potential bypasses. In our view, even if we get bypasses, we still need good active transportation infrastructure to connect our communities to each other. So we sought and received funding for preliminary design. We engaged with Gavin Davidson, who's had 25 years of experience. He's done many projects. The one I want to highlight is the benchmarking the state of cycling in Metro Vancouver. This project was based on the work of Kay Teschke, UBC professor, who studied what types of infrastructure encourage cycling and reduce the risk of injury. And you can see there it's separated from traffic and quiet streets. That led into Gavin mapping the routes that are in Vancouver, and you can see the different colors represent what's comfortable for most, some, few, and very few. And when you take away the things that aren't comfortable for most people, you end up with a lot of gaps. And that's precisely what we have on the Sunshine Coast. We have some very small segments of comfortable infrastructure, and people can't get where they need to go. So we went through this process. We defined the scope. We collected mapping data with the SCRD open data and some of Modi's information. And Gavin and team went through a technical analysis of that data. We did cost assessments with a local contractor. We went through a prioritization process with the data we'd collected, and we delivered a report. And that report delivers a preliminary assessment of the feasibility of the active transportation infrastructure based on the BC Active Transportation Design Guide. So this is it's a high-level desktop, or mostly desktop study, although we did ride the route with Gavin and do some assessment there. So we came up with two priority groupings. One priority group is Gibson's Way from North Fletcher to Highland, where Lower Road leaves, and the other section is from Bay Road in Davis Bay to Wharf Avenue in Sechelt. So back to the next phase. So this is where we are right now, and what we're here to talk to you about is the feasibility and planning that we're trying to work through. So one of the things we needed to find out is how can we do this? And we reached out to a group in Smithers, the Cycle 16 project. It's a 12-kilometer multi-use path from Telkwa to Smithers, and it has some of the same jurisdictional constraints we have. It's connecting a village and a town through a regional district. And so they had to go through a process of getting all sorts of grants and connecting all sorts of bits and pieces as they went along. And so the first phase of that project was completed this summer, or partially completed this summer. So we've worked with the Cycle 16 project management team to get a better understanding of how you move a project like this forward. So it goes from, this is just a detailed listing of the little bits and pieces that you need to do even at this feasibility study level. So you need project management, engineering, archaeological studies, field reconnaissance, environmental overview assessments, engagement, public and First Nations, business case, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of processes that need to be in place for the project to be accepted by, the community and obviously Modi. And so the big question for us was, how does Modi fit into this process? And Cycle System's experience was that Modi really gets engaged once you have a shovel-ready project that you can sell to them. It sort of feels like a chicken and the egg with Modi, so you need their support before you can start, but you can't get their support until you're already done. But that's how it goes. So another question for us was, who's going to be responsible for this infrastructure? We understand the SCRD has an MOU with Modi that establishes that the SCRD would be responsible for any active transportation improvements, but I think part of the thing is our study still doesn't know exactly the type of infrastructure we're going to build, and depending on what it is, it may end up being the responsibility of Modi or a local government. So a neighborhood path on Carmen Road, for example, who knows who's actually responsible for that? You'd expect that Modi should be responsible for that. Protected bike lanes through Gibsons, same thing. Given the state of the MOU right now, any multi-use paths created alongside the highway would likely be the responsibility of the local governments. So one of the things, the advice that we got from Cycle 16 is that you need supportive partners to move this forward. A small society like ours can't really forward this without good support. So we've been reaching out to local governments like you, the District of Sechelt, the town of Gibsons. We've started requesting letters of support, presenting to various groups, and we've received support from Scredo, SD46 DPAC, the Gibsons Rotary, Sunshine Coast Tourism, the Trail Society, the Climate Action Network, and we're in the process of getting support from Vancouver Coastal Health, et cetera, et cetera. We've reached out to our local area politicians. We've talked with Nicholas Simons and received a letter of support from him. We're in the process of receiving a letter of support from Patrick Wheeler. We've started engaging with the First Nations, both Sechelt and Squamish. And on the provincial government side, we applied for and received a community services recovery grant and have hired Ascent Public Affairs to help us negotiate meetings with ministries. We've met with Rob Fleming at Modi and Trish Rorson. We're scheduled to meet with the Ministry of Health, and we have plans to meet with the Ministry of Environment, Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, and Tourism. So to fund this next phase, we need to apply for grants. And the one that we're focusing on today is the Green Municipal Fund. So this is a matching grant of up to $350,000. Basically, if we can come up with $175,000, they'll match that amount to a total of $350,000. This grant requires local support to be successful, and it can include committed as well as applied for funds. And the schedule for this is the end of the year. The annual report that the GMF puts out is kind of an interesting read. Reading between the lines, you can see that the GMF is basically saying that over time, the private sector is going to have to be involved in the climate change mitigation and adaptation. And this is sort of probably one of the easier times as we go forward to receive funding. And so at the end of the year, the grant process is going to be changing, and so we're hoping to apply now to receive that funding. A successful GMF grant needs to demonstrate collaboration with our local areas, and so we're hoping that the SCRD can provide some written support for this application. We're also applying for a REDIP grant. It can be used as matching funds for the GMF application, and the grant date for that is October 30th. So what are we here to request? So we're requesting 4 things. The first thing we're requesting is that the SCRD adopt the preliminary design report as a planning tool. The next is that the SCRD write letters of support for the feasibility and planning study grants, both the GMF and REDIP. The third thing is that the SCRD assign staff, a staff contact for the initiative. And the fourth is that the SCRD start the budgetary processes related to supporting the design for the next phase in the amount of $35,000. So we're not asking the SCRD to commit the funds. What we're asking for is that the SCRD start the process of that so that we can report that we've applied for this in our GMF grants. Thank you so much for your time, and over to you guys.
Thank you. And I'm just going to remind everyone that the process is that if you have any questions for the delegation, that will be right now. And then I'm going to ask staff to introduce the staff report. And so if you have questions for staff, then it comes after. So, having said that, and if you would mind not sharing, unsharing, I see Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this great report. There's a huge amount of information here. I find it very valuable to not just the project, but overall information about the community and how supportive it could be for projects like this. One of your stats, I'm just questioning, you mentioned that there's a resident population of 55,000, and I'm just wondering what that includes, because that's not usually what the number is that I come up with.
Yeah, that's for the entire coast. So the entire Sunshine Coast. Yeah.
Any further questions? Just looking for hands. I just wanted to agree wholeheartedly that the section of road on the outskirts of Gibsons and then the Davis Bay to Sechelt corridor are probably the worst on a bad highway and also the most heavily traveled. So, I mean, your priorities are in the right place, I think. Okay, seeing no further questions, I will thank you very much for your presentation, and I am going to invite staff to introduce their Connect the Coast report. I believe Manager Huntington, are you up?
Good morning, and thank you very much. Staff have had the pleasure of engaging with track volunteers and are very inspired by their professionalism, willingness to collaborate, problem solve, and provide true elbow grease towards grassroots initiatives that address the provision of safe, active transportation facilities on the Sunshine Coast. The Connect the Coast preliminary design report is a testament to TRAC's dedication and their vision of safe and accessible active transportation facilities that could contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Next steps do require the support of local and provincial governments, and the staff report recommendations are intended to offer some of the needed support as well as information to help guide TRAC when seeking future grant and funding opportunities. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Seeing no, I see a hand from Director Bax.
I do have a question about so we receive gas tax, and gas tax is earmarked for this, I believe, this type of project, and I was wondering how we can leverage any of that money, which for the last year I've been wondering how I can use it, and apparently I can't seem to find any way of using it. Is there any way that I can use gas tax to aid in this type of endeavor?
I'm just going to massage your question a little bit. My specific version of that question is Carmen Road. Carmen Road is a secondary road in Area E. It just, for my looking at a map, would appear to have a very wide right-of-way. If we were to do active transportation infrastructure on Carmen Road, could we dedicate gas tax funds to that? Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. When it comes to planning, we typically do not use gas tax funding toward planning because the requirement is that it must result in a physical asset. So gas tax would not be used to support the type of funding that TRAC is seeking over the next little while to support their feasibility study. When it comes to the construction of assets, gas tax is eligible. However, it becomes a bit of a gray zone when we talk about multi-use trails because of the ownership requirement. So when we do come down to construction projects, we work with finance very closely to identify the sources of funding that are most suitable for that expenditure. So we certainly, when we get to a construction phase, we would look at gas tax and we would look at our MOU and have conversations around whether it's eligible or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gavious.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, for the report. Big fan of this project, and I think it would truly transform the coast and make it like I can't even, I'm just trying to imagine it, and I'm just so excited about it. So thank you so much for all the work you do on this. Question about the recommendations from staff. One of the asks from Transportation Choice is a letter of support, and that is not in the recommendations. Is it because we're waiting? So item 3 of the recommendations, we're waiting for this to happen before we issue a letter of support?
Thank you, through the chair. So with letters of support and grants, finance is quite particular around understanding the requirements of the grant and what it is that we are writing a letter of support for. So staff have recommended that we adopt the plan. And so that in of itself is a measure of support for the plan, which could be used by TRAC to apply for grants that don't require a very specific local government requirement or commitment. If there are grants that TRAC is applying for that are very specific in terms of their requirements for local government, we would need to bring that back, no different than we do other requests that come in from community to write letters of support for grant applications. And through that process, we would identify the roles and responsibilities of that grant, what would be the SCRD's role and what would be TRAC's role. So that's why we're recommending, depending on the type of grant, we would like to approach it on a case-by-case scenario.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is for staff. We do have an MOU with Modi saying we maintain active transportation paths, but I understand that we only maintain an active transportation path if, in fact, we've built it and funded it. I wonder if, my question is, would that MOU mean we have to maintain an active transportation path if someone else managed it and built it? It seems to me that that should be Modi.
Does staff think we have a loophole?
Thank you for the question. So we do have an MOU. I'm looking at it as we speak. So the MOU is very specific around the relationship between the SCRD and Modi. So if there are other partners that get involved, it would still require permits and agreements, et cetera. So I think those would be conversations that TRAC would be quite open to when the time comes in terms of, again, roles and responsibilities, who wants to do what partnerships can be established. This group is really open to engaging whoever needs to be at the table to have those conversations. So I'm sure that could be approached at that time, and then that would also lay out very clearly the ongoing responsibilities for the trail or the pathway once it's been constructed.
Thank you. Director Stamford. One moment. Do we have a comment from TRAC? Let me go to Director Stamford. You're up.
I'm not sure if this is going to be answerable at this point, but I noticed, although the priorities aren't listed here on the staff report, one of the focuses has been the Lower Marine Drive Road. And has the staff been able to consider how this particular road, with all its other issues with other departments in terms of drainage and structure, as well as transit. Do they also consider this as a likely route to go, given there's transit and other pressures on this lower road? But I do notice it's used a lot by bikers and cyclists and pedestrians. So I'm just wondering if there's a general agreement that this would be a workable solution.
Okay, over to staff. If you want to try that one, who wants to tackle that one?
Thank you. That is a difficult question to answer, and I don't know if it's appropriate to answer at this point in time. It absolutely, looking from a very high level, does make sense in terms of future potential for active transportation network within the SCRD to connect multiple jurisdictions and other transportation services. It absolutely makes sense. However, it is complex, as you noted, and it would require extensive study, design, and money to construct. But that being said, there are different ways of providing, according to the BC Active Transportation Design Guide, active transportation facilities that support multi-use that could be adapted to that area, such as what's suggested for Carmen Road in traffic speed reductions and signage, just to alert all users on the road that it is part of an active transportation network. So yes, there's potential, but it is a very complex section of the overall plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to our delegation, and then I am looking around hopefully for a director who might want to make a motion. Over to you, Alan.
So my question just relates to a letter of support. So we feel we're fairly close on what our grant applications are going to be, and understand that the SCRD is hesitant to provide a blanket letter of support. If we provided detail on the relationship that we're expecting the SCRD to be a part of in the grant applications, would that facilitate, make it easier to request a letter of support?
I'm guessing the answer might be yes, but I'll go to staff.
Thank you for the question through the chair. The typical process for us is we get a letter from the community that specifies the grant that's being applied for and what exactly they are looking to the SCRD to provide them. And then that comes to the board. I think there's one coming up today at some point, actually. That comes to the board, and then that is when a decision is made, and then the letter can be written quite quickly thereafter. So a letter submitted to the SCRD with those specifics is what we need, and then we get board approval for that. Thank you.
And just to be a little more specific, I think we normally, a delegation comes to the committee and then recommendations go to board, but just for letters of support, we generally go straight to board. So it cuts down on the timelines. Thank you. I'm looking hopefully around. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just try to find the page here. Page 5. All right, would like to make a motion to accept the staff recommendations as listed on page 5.
And I see that seconded. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that passes. Thank you very much, delegation, and we will keep rolling. Our next delegation is Craig Burns, architect, for the Half Moon Bay Community Hall. Okay, we're gonna have a 2-minute recess while the next delegation sets up. Thank you. Welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee of October 19th, 2023. Next item on our agenda is Craig Burns, Principal Architecture for proposal for Half Moon Bay Community Hall. Over to you.
Thank you. This one needs to be muted. Thanks so much. We have a short presentation to introduce a report that was submitted to the committee earlier. And I'd like to share my screen if I can. I can walk through the slides. It's all right. Everybody can see that. So this project started as a replacement project for Cooper's Green Community Hall, and that was some time ago. And earlier this year, a decision was made to relocate the community hall to Connor Park for several reasons which have been well discussed and are not really the topic for today. This report was requested in order to help define the scope of the current project and to evaluate the location for the community hall within Connor Park. There's a bit of a timeline that's included in the report showing the history of the project. Earlier in the year, the decision was made to move to Connor Park. We are now at the end of project definition. Oh. Is it lagging?
I think you shared the wrong.
Let's try that again.
That's the same one.
Okay, we're caught up. During this past summer, SCRD staff led a series of information and engagement sessions around the community. One of these sessions was at Connor Park, and we attended that as well. And the results of this community engagement are part of a staff report that was presented separately, I believe. And the feedback that we heard from the community has had an influence on the evaluation criteria for where to locate the building within the park. The scope of work for the community hall has been reduced from what it was at Cooper's Green, and this is in order to be more consistent with how SCRD community halls are sized and programmed up and down the coast. So roughly it includes a hall space of 1,200 square feet and a kitchen to support that space. That would be a small kitchen, not a commercial kitchen, but a warm-up kitchen for catering and for serving food. As well, there's storage space allocated for tables and chairs and dedicated storage space for utilities and cleaning supplies. There are washrooms to accommodate 100 people in the building, accessible washrooms, and mechanical electrical space to serve the needs of the hall. There's more detail in the report that describes how that space might be used and the kind of activities that could occur in the hall and the kind of activities that probably couldn't occur in that hall. There were 4 sites within Connor Park that were considered. All of these sites were within an area that was defined by staff at the start of the project. And the 4 locations were ranked based on a number of criteria, some of which came from community input, some of which were technical criteria in terms of excavation, parking requirements, that sort of thing. The highest ranking site was option D, and so for each of the sites, a similar exercise of analysis was produced in the report. What we're looking at is option D, and so on the left is a site plan indicating the footprint of the hall and a buffer area for construction and, you know, the impact that it might make in building the building. And that was overlaid with existing program facilities in Connor Park, as well as significant trees and other amenities. And so you can see there's tree canopies that are impacted have been highlighted in each of the options. And then on the right-hand side, there is a matrix that we use to evaluate each of the options. It's a somewhat subjective evaluation, but it's something that we typically do when evaluating site selection for schools and other community buildings. And so this option D ranked highest among the 4 that were studied. The report also provides concept design, and the intention of providing this is to highlight the opportunities that the building has in order to integrate with things that are already existing in the park. The entry is access from the parking area. It makes logical sense. It's coordinated with the entry to the existing washroom facilities. The main hall space could open out into what is a pretty level gathering space area that would provide kind of a breakout space for the hall activities. Maintaining the existing playground is possible in that case, and so kids' indoor and outdoor activities could all be compatible. And the hall space has an aspect to enjoy the park, the view of the trees, the play field beyond. And so this was developed as an example to show how a building of this size could fit within the existing park. There are some amenities in the park that would be affected by the building, obviously, and so through the next design phase, some of those would need to be dealt with in more detail. There are several other aspects of the project that we weren't able to clarify or confirm through the project definition report, and so a risk matrix was developed in order to identify a number of potential project risks that would need to be managed through the next phase of the project. And there's several more of those listed in the report. It's also considered that because this is in an active park setting, there's issues of budget that need to be maintained and logistics for constructing within the park. It may be beneficial to have a different project delivery method rather than a standard stipulated sum contract. And so it's suggested in the report that construction management, particularly some design assist during the design phase of the project, would really benefit the project in order to make good decisions about how the project's implemented and phased and constructed. The overall project budget hasn't changed since January when the decision was made to move the project to Connor Park. During the design phase, typically there is construction cost estimates prepared, and so that is anticipated as the project moves into the design phase, which is next. And, And in the report, there is an example timeline set out that outlines the different phases of design and approval that would lead through to construction. And in parallel, down at the bottom is the suggested involvement of a construction manager or contractor design assist during that design phase. And so these are the components of the report. The report's much longer, but it's been provided to everyone on the committee. And so I'd be happy to answer questions about it. That's the presentation.
Thank you very much. And I am looking to my fellow directors to see if there are any questions. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not familiar with the term schematic design. Is that a preliminary design without engineering, or?
Yeah, the preliminary design, schematic design, concept design, they're all quite similar, but schematic design is a typical phase in our process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for this report. It was really a pleasure to read, and I'm very heartened. Like, the vision is, to me, is spot on, and I think, like, I'm really grateful that first that my community came forward with concerns, and that you listened, and I think we can tell that their concerns were considered. So, I mean, tree protection, screening, sound, like noise for the neighborhood, and so I'm really quite happy about that. Sound, am I too, yeah?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt this broadcast to tell everybody we are pausing the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting to take part in the Great British Columbia Shakeout. Organized by the British Columbia Earthquake Alliance, the Shakeout Drill is an annual opportunity for individuals, communities, schools, and organizations to practice essential earthquake safety measures such as drop, cover, and hold on. Beyond the drill, participants are encouraged to critically review and update their emergency preparedness plans and supplies, while also taking proactive measures to secure their spaces and to prevent potential damage and injuries.
This is the Great British Columbia Shakeout. You're joining thousands of British Columbians in the largest earthquake drill in Canadian history. Right now, drop, cover, and hold on. Drop to the ground. Take cover under a sturdy piece of furniture. Hold on until the shaking stops. If you can't get under something, stay low and protect your head and neck using your arms. Strong earthquakes may trigger tsunami. If you're near the ocean during the earthquake, drop, cover, and hold on. When the shaking stops, quickly walk to high ground. The shaking has stopped. Now count to 60 to allow objects near you time to stop moving. Consider the following questions. Are you prepared? Do you have an emergency kit stocked with enough food, water, and supplies for everyone in your home? Have you secured your belongings so they will not fall and injure you during a strong earthquake? Do you have a plan to reunite with family if the phones are interrupted? For more information on emergency preparedness, visit the website shakeoutbc.ca. Thank you for taking part in the Great British Columbia Shakeout.
I believe the earthquake has now stopped and we have all survived it. So having so done, I apologize to Director Gabius. She made the earth move, but we will turn it back over to you for your comments. Sorry.
Wow, my heart is pumping. That was fun. Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. I feel prepared. So again, just to continue, yeah, thank you. And also, like, the addition of a fire hydrant, I think was very, that's really awesome. And the fire smarting and the metal cladding and all that, that's great. Something that jumped out, no pun intended, was the skill, the bike skill, snake pit, however you want to call it. So I just heard the pump track. I just heard you say that this was going to be considered in the next phase of design, like how, like whether it's redesigned, replaced. What was that? Oh.
Yes. Who wants to take that one?
Thank you, through the chair. So based on the option D location, there, we project an impact on the snake pit. The excavation, the slope of the ground, we need to excavate farther up in that direction than the other way. What we do to, replace that snake pit would be part of the next phase of design and consideration. And we try to avoid having significant impacts on the existing park amenities, so it would be part of something we try to consider, but obviously budget and everything like that. I do know that we'd want to look into potentially our liability in providing that sort of service in a park too. So there's some work to do on the snake pit, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to hear. Just warning. Could you repeat? Yeah.
The last, like, 2 sentences you said.
So in looking to reconstitute the snake pit or make sure that service is still there, we'd have to look at our as a parks department what providing that service has. There's more to it than just saying, well, we'll definitely rebuild it. I think there'll be some design and some consideration outside the scope of this project, and as to what that looks like. I don't want to make any commitments that we'll just rebuild exactly what's there in its space. There will need to be some thought and consideration put into that.
Follow up?
Thank you for that. And I think, would it be possible for the community to be involved in that project? Because this is a great opportunity to have a new pump track, potentially, which would be, a great, I don't know, maybe they're tired of going around the same pump track. So having a new one could be very cool.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's exactly it, like looking at these as opportunities to improve the park and to meet the needs of the residents, and what they'd like to see is exactly how we're viewing these, as opposed to major conflicts. So yeah.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking on page 90, and I really liked the way that you laid out the projects and the steps and everything. It's I haven't seen that before, and I must say it was nice. Is that standard for you to deliver information in that format? Okay, thank you. And then I have one other question. I see that there's spots where it comes back to the board. For instance, project definition report to the board was, I guess, today. And then a little later in 2024, I see a project update that would be to the board.
Yeah, depending on the requirements of the board for approval as opposed to just for information. I think the idea would be to keep the communication open so that people are up to date with where the project's at. But I'm not aware of what the requirements are for board approval for the project. I think we'd rely on staff for some direction on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make note. I like that because I can see what's happening in the future as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I just had a question, and that is only 2 or 3 years ago, when we were in the middle of COVID, there was a lot of talk about changes to design so that we would have more sheltered outdoor spaces and better ventilation in public buildings. And I just wondered if that is something that's being taken into consideration in design of community facilities these days.
I'm not sure if I can speak to that for every place, but code requirements for ventilation, energy performance, those sort of things are always improving. I think the desire to do more than what is kind of code minimum is really a client decision. And so it's great to have direction from the client, from staff, that's a priority, because it absolutely can be included in the project. This is a small building, and so it would be easy to provide additional ventilation. There is some space that's shown on that plan that's covered outdoor space, knowing that that's super valuable on a day like today. Also keeping the existing washroom facility, it has that kind of space, a little covered area that is essential for sort of community gathering and informal use of the space. And so I think that's our ambition from a design point of view, to make sure it really works for people who use it, whether they're renting that space or not. But to answer your question, the needs for the building, the performance criteria do come from the client primarily, so.
Good, thank you. Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair. Some feedback on the design of the actual building. Something that I've asked around, and something that an opinion I also share, is that the kitchen, it would be really wonderful if the kitchen could also be a programming space. So we're not looking for a commercial kitchen or a restaurant or a commissary or anything like that, but a place that would be big enough to accommodate a small group of people who could do food prep, who could do canning workshops, who could do I think that would really set it apart and make it a really great asset to the community, something that we do not have at the moment. So just feedback, if the kitchen could be a little bigger and could maybe have a window or be a bit more inviting than a small reheat station. So, and I think from Vancouver Coastal Health, I remember checking a long time ago, but the requirements for health, I think, is the dishwasher, or either a commercial dishwasher or a sink, one of those double stainless sinks. So if that could be taken into consideration, so maybe the community school wants to make hot lunches there, or we could do hot lunches for seniors, or I think that would be a really great asset.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Seeing no further hands, I'm going to ask for staff to give their project definition report over to Manager. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I move to Manager Doyle to introduce the report, I would like to just take this opportunity to comment on a couple other projects that were sort of tied a little bit to when this original recommendation came out. So as a board will remember, back in March, when we were discussing the Half Moon Bay Community Hall, there were two other resolutions that came out of that day. And so I just want to take an opportunity to provide update on those two resolutions, because you typically ask, so I thought I would just maybe beat you to the punch. So you did approve a budget to conduct park enhancements at Cooper's Green Park. And you also approved a resolution for staff to bring back a report exploring options to maintain the existing hall at Cooper's Green Park. So as been mentioned previously, staff's focus has been on the hall project. However, this fall we've had a bit of staffing capacity return, which has been great. That's enabled us to turn our attention to these other resolutions. And so I do anticipate a report on the existing hall at Cooper's Green Park to come forward before the end of the year. And in terms of the park enhancements, we have built that into our 2024 work plan and anticipate kicking off that project in Q1 of 2024. So that's just a quick update on those other two, and I will turn it back to Manager Kyle to introduce the report that is in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you to Craig for a great presentation, and like Director Gabius said, the project definition report was very thorough, and it really helped to get all the information in one place. The purpose of the staff report in front of you today is to present that project definition report. If there's any questions from the board, staff are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, it was a good report. I actually enjoyed reading it, which is not something I always say. I'm looking for hands, real or otherwise. Aha, Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I go into my questions, thank you, GM Ganger, for this quick update. I heard you say parking enhancements. Oh, park enhancements. Okay, thank God. I was like, what? Okay, and now to my questions. So the procurement protocols, procurement process, is it practice for the SRD to reach out to local builders to kind of get some, to put it out there, or is this something that, you just, is there a way to encourage local builders to place bids on this, basically?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Staff will be following, all the proper procurement guidelines and everything. There are no preferential treatment to local builders that are available.
Thank you. I see Manager Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. As the board is aware, we do have a social procurement part of our procurement process where points can be awarded for various things related to social, including local builders as well. So as Manager Doyle suggested, however, we will follow our procurement policy and the trade acts, et cetera, to make sure that we are staying true to the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, good. Area B, keep coming.
Kit, what is the contract? So the contract in place with Principal Architecture, the Principal Architecture will be the architect of this project. Is that correct? Is that coming down the pipe, or what's?
Thank you for the question. Principal Architecture was engaged at the beginning with the Cooper's Green, and their contract went to the design of that hall. Because we've pivoted, we've had a change in that contract to help us with this part of defining the project. When we move to the next phase, they're interested. They're able to bid on the next phase, but they're not currently the consultant for that part.
And I'm just going to measure, we are having trouble hearing these. You have to get really close to these mics. So just for the next, yeah, okay. Any further, GM Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate that we will be back in front of the board with the contract award. That's sort of our next touch point with the board. So we're going to be moving to detailed design and the issued for construction, and then we have to go over to tender. No matter what procurement or construction methodology we use, that's your next touch point. So we will be back in front of you to award the contract. So at that point in time, you'll know who all the successful vendors were. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we seem to have exhausted questions on this project, partly because it was a very thorough and readable report. So thank you very much. I think we are now at just after 10:30, and we have delegations leaving. So I think I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break here, and we'll be back at 10:38. Good morning. Welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee of Thursday, October the 19th, 2023. Next item up on our agenda is zoning bylaw number 722 revision, and I am going over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Recently, staff became aware of discrepancies in the map schedules of zoning bylaw 722 that were created through an error during the drafting and adoption process. The error affects 13 properties and has the effect of changing zoning, and in one case also the subdivision district. And in terms of the mechanics, the change to zoning and subdivision district is because the maps are what applies the zones that are set out in the bylaw to land. The intent of the zoning bylaw, communicated through the board's project mandate, public engagement, and the staff report when the bylaw was introduced, was explicitly not to redraw zoning boundaries. Changing of zoning on properties requires public notification and an assessment of impacts and alignment with the official community plan, and that process did not occur in this case. Staff recommend that the bylaw revision process be utilized to correct the error. 2 bylaws, one to enable and one to enact the revision, are attached and recommended to be advanced to the board for readings. Staff note that the entire map schedules, A and B, for the zoning bylaw would be added to the revision bylaw number 761 as part of the board meeting package, and those are the highlighted sentences that show up on page 151 and 152 of today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have a quick question. So I understand that all of the property owners affected by this have been contacted. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Director Lee.
It's just a question on who should be voting on this one. Area A is not in bylaw 722, so should I be voting on this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we should correct the voting. It is areas B, D, E, and F.
Thank you for that correction. Are there any further questions? Director Stanford.
I was just going to pass, or put the motion on the floor from page 144 as recommended.
And do I see a seconder? I see a seconder. Are there further questions or concerns? I'm seeing none, so I'm calling the question. All in favor? 4 out of 4, that passes. Thank you very much. Next item up is item 5, temporary movable small home pilot project update. And over to GM Hall.
Thank you again, Chair. Staff are providing an information update or information report as requested. The report focuses on RV-style accommodations, though most of the comments in the report could be extended to other structures that are not covered by BC Building Code. So, for example, micro homes such as buildings on skids. And as an additional note, I guess, on what's in the report, since it was published, staff have received several comments or questions about tiny homes that are manufactured to the CSA Z240MH standard for manufactured homes, which was listed as an option in the 2018 delegation materials, which are included in the agenda on page 163. And staff's comment, I guess, explanatory comment for why that isn't explicitly dealt with in the information report in front of you today, is that in order to comply with the BC Building Code, these structures would need to be affixed to a permanent engineered foundation, making them at least relatively less temporary or movable. So hence not explicitly addressed in the report. And staff would note that these structures are permitted in many zones right now, and there's no minimum size set in the BC Building Code or in SCRD bylaws, or to staff's knowledge, the CSA standard as relates to buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. I took the opportunity to reach out to some of my sources to inquire as to whether the provincial government's current passion for housing might extend to loosening the regulations or revising the regulations around RVs and other sorts of movable homes. And the opinion that I got was that they are very reluctant to do so, which I think is very unfortunate because it leaves us in a really poor situation where a lot of people are, turning to these flexible, small housing options, but they're having to be outside of our bylaws and regulations. And I think that's very unfair. Unfortunately, it would be difficult for us to do a temporary permit in a situation where we don't see any immediate prospect of the regulations changing. So we could strand people. If you got a TUP for 3 years and then renewed it for another 3 years and there was still no regulatory change, then you would be in a very awkward situation. So I think that also is really unfortunate. Is there anything further? Director Stanford.
Being somewhat new to the whole tiny home concept, if I understand correctly, is it simply because they're movable that is the issue with the building code, and that they would not be attached permanently to a sewage system? Or is it fire? Like, do we know what the specific issue is that puts them outside the building code?
Does staff have any elucidation?
I guess the simple way to say it is that the BC Building Code expressly does not extend to these structures. So aspects such as structural safety, fire safety, I haven't seen a comprehensive analysis of the gaps, but it's just fundamentally different. And that's not, I guess, I make no comment on the adequacy of the CSA standards that govern RV construction, but when it comes to local government authority, jurisdiction, ability to permit, ability to inspect, we have none when it comes to motor vehicles. Thanks.
Yes, and I'm going to comment again that a tiny home that doesn't have a motor somehow gets classed as a motor vehicle. Like, the regulations that we have right now are in no way designed to deal with the situations we have. For instance, the situation where a lot of manufacturers now are building something called park model RVs that are actually intended for year-round habitation, but they aren't legal in BC. So, we find ourselves in a regulatory quagmire. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Clarification question. To me, a tiny home is one of those small homes that are built on trailers. They're not meant to be towed around to go camping or anything, but an RV is a recreational vehicle. Are they considered one and the same, or is a tiny home an RV and an RV is a tiny home? Like, what's the difference between the two?
Staff, thank you for the question. Through the chair, staff are not up on the specificity of vocabulary here, but what I can say is it is possible to manufacture a tiny home to the RV standard, a CSA standard. There's no obligation, of course, on the part of a manufacturer to build something to that standard. So as I understand it, it is optional. So some tiny homes may be RVs, but not necessarily. And some tiny homes can be constructed as a purpose-built building, same as one would build any other building, or as a manufactured home and placed on a permanent foundation. So there are options there. But the focus of the analysis that's in the report is on temporary and movable, associated with a temporary use permit-based pilot project. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands, and given that we have a lengthy agenda, I think we will move on. We received that report for information, so thank you. I have additional materials if any of the directors want to read up. I've received some good background material, and I also recommend the District of Squamish website. They have a page on tiny homes that's quite well laid out, listing some of the challenges. So next up, it is item 6, forestry referrals. Our second favorite BC agency, BC Timber Sales, is up, and over to Planner Clark.
Good morning. Each year, BC Timber Sales refers its 5-year operational plan out for public comment. Agencies and nations with jurisdiction in the area also receive a referral. SCRD's practice is to provide technical review to identify any potential impacts that are within our service areas and regulatory authority. The technical review process is specified in a communication protocol between SCRD and BC Timber Sales that was signed by both agencies in 2014. The protocol prescribes that SCRD can comment on recreational and infrastructure assets as well as other interests, which in practice have been our service areas. The technical review is then provided to advisory planning commissions for comment and subsequently brought forward to committee, which is where we are today. Directors will note that APC minutes from the BC Timber Sales review are also on this agenda. All 5 advisory planning commissions or APCs agreed with staff recommendations. Staff would like to note that SCRD is in receipt of phase 1, 2, and 3 of watershed assessments for Mount Elphinstone, which are subsequent to this current review, and which are based on previous feedback from BC Timber Sales operating plans. A subsequent report will include a review of these assessments and address the board resolution concerning cut blocks associated with Timber Sales License TA 0521, which is in Area D, Roberts Creek. I'm pleased to introduce you this morning to Sierra Rempel, SCRD Strategic Planning Coordinator, who conducted this year's technical review.
BC Timber Sales 2023 to 2027 operating plan proposed 5 new blocks concentrated in high elevations on Mount Elphinstone, lower elevations near McNabb and Dakota Creeks, and in Hotham Sound north of Earls Cove. Staff reviewed these newly proposed blocks for their potential impact to SCRD service areas and assets through the lens of drinking water management, stormwater and stream flow hazard implications, and official community plan objectives. This year's technical review raised concerns that are consistent with previous operating plan referrals, including the cumulative impact of resource activities within watersheds and aquifer recharge areas on or near Mount Elphinstone. Staff are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We did get a lot of comments back from the APCs, in general support, but also encouraging us to broaden our concerns much more widely, which unfortunately does fall outside of our regulatory authority, tempted though we might be. Director Bax.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the staff for this report and bringing this forward to our service committee. And I've made I haven't hidden my feelings about this type of thing, and I really believe that we need to create a buffer around our community to protect our watersheds and our recreational areas. That these industrial practices can go elsewhere. You did mention TA 0521. I don't see it in this report. Maybe I just missed it. Do you know the status on that cut block?
Thank you for the question through the chair. As mentioned in our opening remarks, staff are not aware of the current status of that block. However, it was reviewed in a watershed assessment that BC Timber Sales has provided to staff. They have provided a number of other watershed assessments on Mount Elphinstone, and staff will bring forward a further report about that in particular.
Thank you. Director Stamford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What is the process with these cut blocks after we send in our recommendations? Like, how much influence do we have on the change of plans based on our comments?
Thank you very much for the question. Staff's understanding is that when the comments are within SCRD service areas or jurisdictional authority, that feedback is considered. And when SCRD receives the blocks, they're at the stage of being able to make small adjustments to the size or the shape of the block.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. So the report speaks of the cumulative impacts of forestry, like stormwater management, impacts on watershed. Given that private large-scale developments often involved quite a bit of land clearing, does the SCRD give similar considerations to the cumulative impacts of developments?
Does GM Hall want to tackle that one?
Thank you, Chair. As a more macro question, I can offer a brief comment. The tools to manage impacts on land use overall, and I guess I would use the term cumulative impacts, are certainly in the scope of the review that's just being initiated on official community plans. We're certainly, with every passing year and climate change impacts becoming more noticeable, we're certainly aware of the cumulative impacts of change to private land as much as we're seeing from the forestry sector. Thanks.
Thank you. Looking around, I was kind of, looking for a motion. Look at that, a volunteer.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the recommendations listed on page, is that again, 167? Thank you.
I see a seconder. Great. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you very much to staff for this kind of thankless feedback to BC Timber Sales. Next up, item 7, DVP application for 13305 Camerley Road. And over to staff, who are not Sierra Rempel, but sign didn't change. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so this variance application for 13305 Camerley Road seeks relief from the zoning bylaw parcel coverage allowance for buildings and structures by increasing the maximum permitted parcel coverage from 15% of total parcel area to 18.7. The variance would facilitate construction of an addition to a pre-existing residential structure while also bringing the property back into compliance after a recently constructed auxiliary structure pushed the parcel coverage over the permitted 15%. Notifications were mailed to properties within 50 meters of the statutory requirements, and no comments were received. Staff have evaluated the proposal and recommend issuing the development variance permit as noted in the recommendations. The property owners, Jeff Keeley and Jill White, are in attendance today, and staff are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there is anyone in the webinar audience or in the boardroom wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand. If attending virtually, please use the raise hand tool or *6, and I will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, please give your full name, and if you wish, your address for the record. In order to keep our meeting moving, we ask that you please keep your comments focused on the DVP application before us and limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So, seeing Mr. Keeley, I invite you to come up to the mic. Yes, and just reminder that you need to use the mic so that people in our audience can hear. And, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Keithley. I'm here with my wife, Jill White, and we reside at 13305 Camerley Road up in Garden Bay. And we want to thank you for our consideration of our application for the variance from 15% to 18% as recommended by staff. We obviously ask for your approval. We do want to issue or address one issue within the staff report, and that is the reference to Seashell Nation, which would result in a PFR, and that's found on page 4 of the report and 183 of your package. We first learned of the PFR request on September 15th, 2003, while away on vacation. When we received the attached email from Chris Humphreys, when we received that email, this despite the fact that our variance application was filed with planning in early April, and we had a number of meetings and communications with planning since then, and at no time was there ever a mention for the potential need for a PFR. In Chris's September 15th email, he quoted from an undated communication that planning apparently received from Nadine Tardif and subsequently Danica Tardif at the Seashell Nation regarding our application. And Chris's email is appended to this package. And I'll just take you to the relevant sections. The nation's comments are, I'm writing regarding the application for a development variance permit application to facilitate the construction of an addition to an existing residential structure and construction of a shed structure. And it gives the address and all the rest of that. Chris's September 15th email suggests the nation requires, as a precondition of our proceeding with the work, a preliminary field reconnaissance. And in quotes from their letter, of the area designed to assess the archaeological potential of the area and inspect for archaeological materials such as stone tools, shell midden, pictographs, and culturally modified trees. It is a surface inspection only, no ground disturbance is involved. While the report that Chris authored fully recognizes the pre-existence of the garden shed, the correspondence from the nation suggests they believe the shed is yet to be constructed. And Jill and I wonder if this may have triggered the request for a PFR. We're also left wondering whether the nation was made aware that our property has been fully developed, leaving none of the areas relevant to this report undisturbed. For these reasons, we have asked and continue to ask for copies of the correspondence between planning and the nation, and to date, our requests have not been responded to.
Okay, I'm just going to say that you're hitting the 3 minutes, and at the moment, we are making a decision on the DVP, and the correspondence with the Seashell Nation and the archaeology is actually outside of our agenda item today.
Well,
So-
let me quickly summarize. I'll take you to why our concern is. If you look at the graphic that I attached from the SCRD property viewer, there are 6 properties in the development area where we are that have been built in the last 6 years, and they're indicated in green, including ours, which is green and pink. Not one of those, which were all built on undisturbed land, was asked for a PFR, and ours is now being asked to do a PFR when 100% of the land that someone would look at a surface review is nothing what it used to be. Where we intend to build the building is down already. We excavated below the forest duff. We're into the mineral soils deposited by the last glaciation some 14,000 to 17,000 years ago, before a single human being ever walked it. So there's simply zero possibility of finding anything of any human contact in that. So we can't understand why, when all 6 of the other properties were not asked for a PFR, including our own, why we're now being asked to look at a PFR when, quite frankly, literally nothing can be found because it's either been dug up, covered over, or built on. And we've asked for the correspondence in the hopes that that will assist us in our discussions with the Sechelt Nation.
Thank you. And I'm going to say again that that is a separate matter to the DVP application that is before us this morning. I am not going to necessarily try to make sense of processes, it being outside of my expertise. I am looking to the directors for any questions about this DVP application. And I'm not seeing any. Director Box.
Not a question so much as an observation that given the report's quite robust in its information, and it really makes a lot of sense to approve this. And so from my perspective, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the recommendations I'm going to move that we adopt the recommendations as they appear on page 180.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yes, I see a seconder. Is there anything further on this? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris.
And next up, Half Moon Bay Child Care Center grant in aid change. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to address a request for a change to a grant and aid approved grant purpose. And due to the grant being funded by all electoral areas, the amended purpose would need approvals of each area. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much. I think the report was quite straightforward. Over to Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I have no problem with this request, this change of scope. I think it's even more in line with our policy, and I think it aligns well with increasing food security, emergency preparedness. So I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 187.
Thank you, and I see a seconder. Any other? Over.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, one mistake in the recommendation. The amount was actually $49.80 rather than $32.60, but I just wanted to make that clear.
And so the recording secretary notes that there was an error. Okay, we have it. Therefore, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That's over to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, so the recommendation is that the committee provide direction, and I'm just clarifying that the direction is that the proposed change be authorized.
That appears to have been Director Gabius's intent, but perhaps you'd like to state it for the record.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make it clear for the record that it was my intent to approve the change of scope. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Good, thank you. We all know what we're voting on. Excellent. I like it when that happens. Okay, all those in favor? That's 5 out of 5, so thank you very much. That passes. And we move on in a surprisingly timely way to the minutes of the APCs. And I'm going to go through them one at a time because there were quite a few recommendations in the various minutes. So I'm going to start with Area A. Director Lee, do you have anything?
No, I'm content. Thank you.
No, good. All right, Area B, you're up.
The recommendations were great. That was a great meeting, and I have no comment.
Thank you. All right, D, Kelly. Director Bax.
I wasn't there. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to know if you wanted to pull any other recommendations for consideration.
No, I do not.
Thank you. Looks like it's my turn. All righty. Sorry, I lost my notes that I had prepared for this morning. Recommendation number 7 has been dealt with. And most of the other recommendations, I think, are included in the BC Timber Sales operating plan review, or they exceed our mandate as a local government. So I'm not going to pull any recommendations at this time, but I'll have a chat with my APC and may come back to it. So Area F.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, although I wasn't at this meeting, I really appreciate the detailed and very clear recommendations from Area F APC. There is one point, it doesn't need to be pulled because I think it's outside of our authority, but to note that point 2.2 is to protect valuable fish and wildlife habitat areas associated with McNair and Dakota Creeks, Mohawk Creek, and the Rainy River. This is considered quite important to the APC, but I recognize that's not part of our jurisdiction. So just a note that was an important feature for them.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go back to my APC and note that one of the things that they are requesting on the part of the SCRD falls within the board purview, which is that they wish us to advocate to provincial agencies to improve their practices around industrial activity in our watersheds, and I'm fully on board with that. They also asked in recommendation number 3 that our referral recommendations in the staff report be sent to the MLA, the minister responsible, and the premier. I don't know if there's an appetite to do that, but That's recommendation number 3 on the top of page 227. I have no difficulty sending the BC Timber Sales stuff to our MLA and the minister. I'm not sure about the premier, but what the heck? Full meal deal. So, okay, I'll make that as a motion, recommendation number 3. Is there a seconder? There's a seconder. All right. Any comments? No? All right. I'm calling the question. All those in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. We have now reached the end of our agenda. There is no communications, no new business, no in camera. We will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor. And then finally, are there any questions from the survivors in our audience? And I am not seeing any. The room is empty of real people, and the virtual people are not raising their hands. So I think we are done for today. Thank you very much, everybody.